Bleeding purple and gold. From the heart of Los Angeles, this is the LakersNation.com podcast with your host, Trevor Lane.
Welcome, everybody. We are powered by CLNS Media and brought to you today by Harry's Razors. You can find a great deal on razors at harrys.com/Lakers and ZipRecruiter. Head to ziprecruiter.com/Lakers for all of your hiring needs. Well, today's show is supposed to be all about the NBA draft, but we've got a number of rumors to dive into. So I've got Alex Kennedy from hoopshype.com with me today. Please head over to iTunes, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this show. We'd certainly appreciate it, and let's jump right into everything. Alex, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, obviously, we've got plenty to talk about today. There's a million things going on, but it's been a little while since we've had you on the show. What's new with you?
Well, actually, we are launching a HoopsHype podcast that I'm going to be hosting. I'm really excited about that. We're going to have NBA players, executives, coaches, agents on the podcast, as well as some celebrities that have ties to the game of basketball. We already had a star NFL player. We're going to have some actors, musicians, people like that. So that's really the main thing that we have going on right now, main new thing. The podcast is going to launch in the next few days. We're going to try to have a really big rollout with a bunch of episodes early on so people can kind of binge listen to it and get a feel for what the podcast is going to be like. And then eventually it'll be more of a weekly, bi-weekly thing. But yeah, that's going to be coming out here the next few days, and it's on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, all of those. You can find the HoopsHype podcast.
See, Alex, I'm glad that you mentioned the podcast here, promoting that. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I can't wait to give that a listen. Sounds like you're going to do a fantastic job there. But I got to save you a little bit here. You might be getting into a little bit of trouble because there's something else happened that's new since the last time we talked. Didn't somebody get married?
Oh, yes. See, I'm thinking professional stuff. I'm in promotion mode. Yes, I did get married. Thank you for bringing that up. You are keeping me from getting in trouble. Yeah, that was about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. It was a lot of fun. We had an outdoor ceremony. It didn't rain. Got very lucky here in Florida. You never know when it's going to rain. So everything went great. It was a lot of fun, and married life has been good so far. I'm about 3 weeks in, and things are still fine. So things are good. And then August, we're doing a honeymoon. So we, planned it around the NBA season a little bit. She's been very flexible and awesome there. So yeah, it's been very cool.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, big congratulations on that. I mean, of course, congratulations on the podcast, but giant congratulations on getting married. Awesome news.
Thank you.
And yeah, just remember, I'm sure you've heard it a million times, but happy wife, happy life, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. So today's show, I was going over my notes for the show, and I put everything together, and this was going to be our big draft preview show. We were going to talk all about the NBA draft, and then in the last 16 hours or so, we've just been bombarded by crazy NBA news. So I figure really we have to just jump into news to start. And let's begin things with Paul George. It was just a couple hours ago that Adrian Wojnarowski from The Vertical tweeted out that Paul George has informed the Indiana Pacers that he will be leaving as a free agent in 2018, and the Lakers are his preferred destination. What's your take on this? What's going on?
Well, it's not a huge surprise. You had seen some of the comments from Paul George recently where he said, I'm a Pacer right now. I'm going to finish out my contract with the Pacers. And, those kind of things are things that we hear from a star player whenever they are looking to leave or have one foot out the door. I think if you look back at, what guys like LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, Dwight Howard, look at all the players that kind of left their team. They would always talk about, being with that team right now. I'm with this team right now. And they would talk about, the present rather than the future. So it's not a huge surprise that he is looking toward, to leave in the future. I think it makes things very easy for the Lakers because there was there was a lot of talk about him possibly going there, but by him actually telling the organization, look, I'm leaving as a free agent, my preference is the Lakers, that's going to scare a lot of other teams off that may have been interested in trading for Paul George. It puts Indiana in a situation now where, they can still trade him to another team that may try to convince him to stay. But now, I mean, if you're the Lakers, you love this. You're in great position. You can either trade for him now and not give up as much because really they have all the leverage, or you can wait for him to come and then in the meantime, talk to free agents and say, look, we're pretty sure Paul George is coming. It's going to help them tremendously. And I think this is the best case scenario for LA and really the worst case scenario for Indiana.
Right. I mean, I guess the only real positive for Indiana is now they have some certainty. They know, yes, he is leaving. But by saying that the only team I'm really looking at, or he didn't say the only, but the report said that his preferred destination is the Lakers. And I mean, preferred does suggest that maybe there's some other options out there. But by actually naming where he really wants to go, that limits things quite a bit. I mean, if you're another franchise and you're looking at giving up assets for a player like Paul George, who certainly, I mean, 29 teams in the NBA would love to have Paul George, but if he's telling you, I'm a free agent next summer and I really want to go to the Lakers, then you're going to be pretty hesitant to deal anything significant for him. So with that being the case, do you see the Lakers trying to put together a package this summer and just get him in-house immediately, or do you think they're better off just waiting?
Well, I think most teams, first of all, around the NBA assumed that he was going to the Lakers. There was, enough rumors and enough gossip that people assumed that, the Lakers were the team he was eyeing. But to answer your question, if I'm the Lakers, I make an offer. I definitely put something out there. I wouldn't give up, very much. You just don't have to. There's no point in trading away, multiple young players or trading away, key draft picks to get Paul George, and then when you can get him as a free agent. I think it doesn't make sense to give up too much. But if the price isn't that much and you can get him in a year sooner, and then that allows you to start going after other free agents and kind of planning for what the team is going to look like when he's there, then yeah, I mean, if you can do it without giving up a lot, then I would definitely try to. But I would make an offer that's not giving up significant pieces. That's just my opinion. I think they have to do something anyway. As I saw you tweet about this, that in order to get to max cap room, they have to get rid of some of those contracts anyway. Maybe it's Jordan Clarkson that gets moved, because I think they're going to have a really hard time moving, Mozgov or Deng. So they have to make some kind of move anyway, but I wouldn't give up a lot in a Paul George trade. You just don't have to. And I think also it hurts if Paul George is coming as a free agent, you want to have as much talent around him the day he gets there as possible. So it hurts your team long term too. You don't want to, really wipe out the supporting cast that would be around him.
Right. I'm seeing people that are on Twitter, and obviously people are going to get excited when a rumor like this breaks, but people are saying things like, make sure Deng is in the deal, or trade them Deng in the 28th pick, or Mozgov in the 28th pick. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because if you're the Pacers, whatever you're getting for Paul George, now it's not going to be what a normal superstar would command on the trade market, but whatever you're getting for him has to be at least better than whatever they would get in terms of cap space, as far as just letting him walk away goes, right? I mean, if you're the Pacers and you have to absorb Mozgov's deal, or you can just keep Paul George and then let him walk away as a free agent, well, you just let him walk, and that way you have actual cap space to work with. So I think that's one thing that people have to keep in mind is it's not like you can just give the Pacers literally anything you want and they have to take it. That's not the situation that they're in. So yeah, I mean, you're right. You don't want to give them too much, but you have to give them something. And there's a fine line between paying too much to where it's not worth it for the Lakers, where they're better off just waiting for next summer and kind of risking it that maybe another team catches his eye between now and then. And then there's the other side of it you have to satisfy, is you have to find something that the Pacers will accept. And whether those two things cross, whether those two lines ever meet, we'll have to see. But in my mind, I would think something along the lines of like Jordan Clarkson, Tariq Black in the 28th pick, or something like that. Maybe the Pacers would ask for Julius Randle instead of Tariq Black. I don't know if the Lakers would include him, but at least that's kind of in my mind along the lines of what they would do. Certainly no like D'Angelo Russell or Brandon Ingram or the second pick, right?
Right, you don't give up any of those pieces. Julius Randle was mentioned in Adrian Wojnarowski's article, and I thought that was interesting. That was someone that Woj kind of mentioned in his article about Paul George. So maybe that's something that both teams would be willing to do. But even still, I'd still be kind of hesitant if I'm LA just because you don't have to do it. I think, as you mentioned, you want to give Indiana won't do it for Mozgov or Dang or anything like that. They're not, they have to look out for themselves. Kevin Pritchard is a really good executive. He had a really good run in Portland there. Obviously injuries decimated that team, but he's someone that is good at rebuilding. He gets draft picks, he gets young players, and he's going to put a team in a good position. So he's not going to do any favors and just give away Paul George to LA and take back the Lakers, bad contracts or whatever it may be. So, but at the same time, if I'm the Lakers, I'm not giving up, significant pieces. Even giving up Jordan Clarkson, a first-round pick, or Julius Randle in a first-round pick, that may be too much if Paul George is coming as a free agent and how much he loves LA. He's raved about Magic Johnson. If you don't have that much, fear, then you may be better off just waiting. I know other teams are going to try to pursue Paul George because he's a special player. He's coming off an amazing postseason, but I think this is where, if you're the Lakers, you can feel pretty confident you're going to get him, and then you almost want to hold on to guys like Clarkson and Randall, as well, and just wait this thing out. That's, I think that you have to be careful. There is some risk involved, but I'm not sure the risk is high enough to part ways with those, first round talents.
Right, I'd agree with that. You gotta be careful because if you spend too much to bring in Paul George, then you bring him onto a team that doesn't have much talent. And then, he starts looking around during the season if it's not going well, and he's getting frustrated that there isn't talent around him and all that. And then suddenly you're dealing with a player who's unhappy, who is a free agent very quickly, and then suddenly you gave up assets for nothing because he walks away. Of course, we all remember the Dwight Howard situation. So it's an interesting thing that we're going to have to be, keeping an eye on. I know Ramona Shelburne from ESPN reported that the Lakers are not looking to part with any of their young players in a deal for Paul George. So we'll see where this all goes. It's going to be certainly something to watch. Now, one of the things that I always like to try to figure out when I look at leaks like these kinds of rumors is where it may have come from. I know you recently wrote a piece about how NBA trades come together and everything like that, but when you get stories like these that are coming out, there's always some kind of a source, and you always have to kind of figure out what their motive may be. And it's not an easy thing to do, is it?
No, I mean, sometimes it's easy. Sometimes you can tell, which camp or which team really benefits from having the information out there. I think in this situation, it's just something that had been assumed for a while. So whenever Paul George goes to the team and says, hey, here's, what I'm planning to do, here's how I feel, it can be leaked by Paul George's camp, maybe Indiana, told a few different teams, and then they went and told the media. The Lakers, obviously, they could have been the one to leak it if they heard about what happened, just because that would scare other teams off and really kind of hurt Indiana from a trade standpoint. And it would be very clear that, Paul George is eyeing the Lakers. It's tough in a situation like this when there's that many people involved, when you have a bunch of different executives, when you have agents, when you have players. It's not as easy as when, it's two teams discussing a trade and you're trying to see which team leaked the trade rumor. It's tougher whenever there's a lot of different people and levels. So I think it could have been a number of different people. But I think, my guess is probably Paul George's camp or the Lakers, if I had to guess.
So if I see this as my initial reaction when this rumor hit was that it was a attempt to try to get Paul George moved this summer, because I think this burns the bridges with the Indiana fan base. And if Paul George stays in Indiana for the season, like he just talked about the other day, he said, I'm with the Pacers this season. As you mentioned earlier, you said, I'm under contract this year. And obviously it's a very non-committal answer, but I would have to think that he's going to take a lot of heat from the Pacers fans as soon as he actually starts playing games in front of them, right? I mean, he's going to be getting booed quite a bit, I would imagine. So in the players' side of things, looking at that side of it, that's going to be kind of tough. I'm trying to think of any situations that were like that in the past.
I'll name one: Dwight Howard in Orlando. Just because I lived it and I was there for every game. It was crazy because you had that offseason where he basically, without coming out and saying it, but kind of like this situation where he made it clear through his camp that he was going to be leaving Orlando. But then he said, I still have a year left of my contract. I'm going to play it out. At media day, it was extremely awkward. He said, I'm a Magic player right now. I'm in Orlando right now, and I can't think about my next contract. I'm just focused on the present. So he didn't do anything to dispel the rumors, and then kept making it very clear through his camp and through people around him that he was going to be leaving. So, and then, of course, Magic fans were furious because they were thinking he was going to be there long-term, potentially. They felt like he was kind of turning his back on the team and wanted out. So it was a really weird situation. And not only does it affect the player because they're being booed and, they can't really be in the situation they want to be in, it affects the entire locker room. It was a really strange year. All the players had to answer questions about it. It becomes a big distraction. So you look at how it will impact Indiana this year. They're trying to develop some of their young guys like a Miles Turner, but this just becomes a circus that really distracts from everything. So players are going to be asked about it every game on the road. New media members are going to be coming up to Paul George and the team and asking, about the future, about what the season's been like. And yeah, players can say, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not going to address these rumors and, give boring answers. But the media will keep coming because every city you go to, it's that, typically that media, it's their first time seeing the player and being able to write about the situation. So it's going to be, and that's why eventually, Orlando ended up trading Dwight Howard. And a lot of these situations are the same way. Carmelo Anthony with the Denver Nuggets, he made it clear he was going to leave. He didn't sign that extension, which everyone kind of expected him to do. And then every, few weeks, there was new rumors about whether he was unhappy or what team he was going to, accept a deal to or what team he was trying to push for. And it ultimately ended up being the Knicks. So that was another one where he went through media day and some games and then eventually finally got traded. But yeah, it's always a really awkward situation. And I think it's difficult for everyone, from the coaching staff to the players to the front office to the actual star player involved. It's a strange situation for everyone that's in the organization.
In your mind, this, having gone through all of that with Orlando and Dwight Howard, and Lakers fans certainly understand frustrations with Dwight Howard.
Right.
So having gone through all of that, there is now some definite pressure on the Indiana Pacers to go ahead and make a deal, right?
There's some pressure, and I think Paul George would prefer to be with the Lakers sooner than later because no matter what he says about finishing his contract with the Pacers and all of that, no player wants to go through an entire season where they're being hated and having to deal with all of that. So, if he could hit free agency right now and go sign with the Lakers, of course he would take that. He would love that. That would be his preferred destination. And also, it's one more year later. So we're talking about him joining the Pacers when he's joining the Lakers when he's 28 years old. And that's less than ideal. You're giving up a year of your prime where you're kind of in flux and kind of waiting for free agency to come. So, yeah, I do think that for Paul George, he would prefer it. But then you look at the Pacers, yeah, there is some, outside pressure, some pressure from the fans and things like that to make a trade. But at the same time, they don't have to make a move. They can sit back and kind of wait and see what happens. And like you said, they don't have to accept a bad move that puts them in a worse situation or they take on a bad contract. But yeah, I think if you can get something for him, you want to. You never want to have a star player leave and lose him for nothing in return. I think that's one of the reasons why Paul George may have told the Pacers that he's going to leave, because he didn't want to put them in a situation where they're completely screwed over and have nothing in return for him, nothing to show for him. So that's where I think you can, there is some pressure to make a move because you want to get something back. The question is, what would that be from the Lakers? Or is there some team out there that's willing to take on Paul George as a rental? I look back at the whole Dwight Howard situation and the whole Carmelo Anthony situation. I remember the Brooklyn Nets were willing to take on Dwight Howard as a rental, but then ultimately, their trade talks with Orlando fell through. They did the same thing with Darren Williams and then re-signed him at that time. So with Carmelo Anthony, there were some teams that were rumored to be interested in that as well. Houston was one of them. There were some teams that were, talking about bringing him in as a rental. So maybe there's a team out there, maybe a team like Boston, for example, could say, hey, let's try to make a trade for Paul George. We're not going to give up, as many assets as we would if he were committed. Obviously, you're not going to give up a ton of assets in case he does walk as a free agent. But, can they put together a better offer for Paul George as a rental than the Lakers are willing to, put together just because they know Paul George is coming as a free agent? That's the question. And I'm sure Indiana, that's what they want. They want to find that team out there that's willing to put together an offer as a rental, because then they can, try to increase what they can get from the Lakers and maybe start a bidding war.
Right. Any kind of bidding war, even if it's with minor assets, is a win for Indiana. So if they can get, I mean, I look at those teams that are kind of on the cusp, that are at least close or could talk themselves into, being a contender. Maybe the Toronto Raptors, of course, the Cavs, obviously, the Clippers, maybe, of course, what kind of assets those teams have. That's, debatable and everything. But maybe there is somebody out there that would bring him in on a 1-year deal just as a rental, knowing that he may walk, and then they'll just take a chance and hope that they can convince him to stay. That's going to be one of the big storylines, of course, heading into the draft. Who knows? I mean, maybe Paul George could be moved by draft night. We don't know exactly what's going to happen from here, but this certainly makes everything more interesting. And man, I mean, the NBA offseason is just awesome. I tweeted about this earlier. Like, it's like Christmas, right? I mean, it's incredible that we're not playing any games, and I think the fan engagement is just as high as if teams were actually on the court and playing. It's amazing the way the NBA has worked that out. Gotta love it, right?
Yeah, you have to love it. I mean, I think there are times where the NBA offseason is more exciting than the NBA season, and that's so rare. You look at Major League Baseball or the NFL, and there's just not as much player movement. There's not as much, there's not as many blockbuster trades. But every year, it seems like the NBA has some kind of crazy offseason, and then it leads to some amazing storylines entering the year. We've seen so many star players change teams. I know, that can be a negative at times because, you don't have the same player that spends his entire career with one team. But it leads to some really intriguing storylines. It leads to some crazy offseason moves, whether it's trades, whether it's stuff that happens, around draft night, whether it's free agency. There's always something, and always something to talk about. There's no question about it. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I think the NBA has done to separate itself from some of the other leagues. And it's always frustrating whenever, players leaving your team. But it's interesting for, I think, 29 other fan bases and casual sports fans too, just because people are really interested in player movement and trades.
We're going to pause for just a moment so I can talk about Harry's razors. Now, shaving is never all that fun, but Harry's does a good job of making it clean and easy. Harry's razors are extremely high quality. They're delivered right to your door. You don't need to go to the store and sort through a bunch of different options, and you get a high quality razor. In fact, Harry's is so confident that you're going to love their blades. They're going to give you their trial shave set for free when you sign up at harrys.com/Lakers. All it costs is $3 for shipping. That's it. $3 for shipping, and you get their trial set for free. Totally worth it. Harry's is all about giving you a great shave at a fair price, which is why over 3 million guys have switched over to Harry's. That's incredible. So again, all you have to do to claim your free trial offer, which is a $13 value, and you get it for free. All you got to pay is those $3 for shipping. All you got to do is go to harrys.com/Lakers. Again, you get a weighted ergonomic razor handle. These handles really are great. They grip perfectly in your hand. You get 5 precision engineered blades with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade, which comes in handy. You get a lathering shave gel and a travel blade cover. It's quite a deal. Again, go to harrys.com/Lakers to start your free trial right now. That's harrys.com/Lakers. Right. Now, we've seen tons of rumors already, obviously, leading up to the draft and everything, and I'm expecting there to be even more. But we actually did have one legit move that is going to be processed on Monday. We're recording this on Sunday, so it's going to process tomorrow. And that's this big trade that the Boston Celtics and Philadelphia 76ers made. So let's talk about that just a little bit here. The Celtics are trading the first overall pick in this draft. They're trading it to Philadelphia. They are planning on using that pick to select Markelle Fultz. And in return, the Boston Celtics are getting the number 3 pick in this draft. Plus, they're getting one more first rounder. They'll get the Lakers pick in 2018 if it lands anywhere 2 through 5. And if it doesn't, then they'll get the Kings pick in 2019 unprotected. Alex, what was your reaction when this deal went down?
I was really surprised. I'm surprised Boston did it. I think Markelle Fultz is by far the best player in this draft. I think he could be a superstar in this league. I'm a really big Markelle Fultz fan. He's a guy that is a perfect fit for today's NBA in terms of his ability to score the ball, shoot the ball. He's very efficient. He also did a pretty good job, passing the ball and rebounding last year. And he's so young. He just turned 19 years old. Whereas, you look at a guy like Josh Jackson, he's 20 and a half. You look at Lonzo Ball, he's about to turn 20. Fultz is younger than, most of these other one-and-done guys even. So I think his ceiling is just so high. I think you look at now the core he'll be in with Philadelphia alongside Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, Dario Saric, Rashawn Holmes, Jahlil Okafor, some of the other guys there. That's a really talented team, and I like the move a lot for Philly. I think they needed their point guard of the future. At number 3, it looked like Fultz and Lonzo Ball would both be gone, so they go from not being able to draft a point guard or having to reach for a guy like De'Aaron Fox to now all of a sudden getting Fultz, who I think could be, like I said, a superstar. I love move for Philly. I'm surprised that Boston did it. I'm not sure what Boston has up their sleeve, because they've really there's a lot of mixed messages coming from Boston, I feel like, because on one hand, if they had drafted Fultz, then you're saying, okay, he can come in, play off ball alongside Isaiah Thomas, maybe, and it kind of keeps their championship window open longer. But you would still have a guy that could be a superstar, and I like the idea of him being in Boston. Now at number 3, they either go with a Josh Jackson or a Jason Tatum. I'm not, and that kind of player, yeah, that's a good player. Maybe it fits a little better alongside their core of Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley, Al Horford. Who knows what they do in free agency. But then it seems like they just keep kicking the can down the road further, and I'm not sure that's the right move. It almost seems like they're trying to keep their team, in contention now by keeping this core together, but then also be able to plan for 8, 9, 10 years from now, and keep kicking the can down the road by picking up, a pick that may not come until 2019. I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of the move. Unless, maybe they're going to turn around and try to trade the number 3 pick and, this other first-round draft pick that they just acquired for a Jimmy Butler. Maybe they make a play for Paul George even. I really don't know. But I'm not a huge fan of the move. I would have rather seen Fultz go to Boston. I think that would have been better for them, and I think I'm a big enough believer in Fultz that I feel like he could have really helped them and been their next superstar after Isaiah Thomas leaves, or allowed them to trade Isaiah Thomas even.
I agree with that. I will say that on the financial side of things, that what I've seen is that from moving back from 1 to 3, the difference in the salaries between the first pick and the third pick actually opens up a full max slot.
Yeah, for them. I've seen that. So it opens up the door for a Gordon Hayward or a Blake Griffin. So I get that. But, are those guys really going to come? I don't know. Maybe they will, and I know you want to be prepared for that moment when it comes, but I feel like there's a better way to clear out salary, those couple $1 million. There's a better way to do it than dropping from 1 to 3 and dropping from a guy like Markelle Fultz to either Jackson or Tatum. I feel like there's a big gap between those players, bigger than what I would have given up to clear that, a couple $1 million for a max contract spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think, there's some benefits to the Celtics to this. Of course, if they end up hanging on to the pick, if whoever they get at 3 ends up being anywhere close to Markelle Fultz in, say, 3-4 years, then it's a big win for them, because they basically pick up a second first rounder for nothing. But, look at the extra first that they got. And when the news first broke, it was that they got 2 firsts. And then it was like, wow, okay, they really got a lot.
That would have made sense. Then all of a sudden you're talking about another trade that, like Brooklyn, where they're, they just have so many assets, and that would I would have been, that would have been an easy call for me. Boston has to do that almost. That
would have swung things in the totally in the other direction. But then we found out that it wasn't actually 2 firsts. It's the 2017 first, and then they get the Lakers pick if it's 2, 3, 4, or 5. And when this Paul George news broke, I thought, man, that could greatly alter the chance of the Lakers pick falling in that range. Because, as of right now, if the Lakers just pick, Lonzo Ball or Josh Jackson or whoever with the second pick, and they, as Magic Johnson has said, they probably aren't going to be too active in free agency. So if they don't really sign anybody major in free agency, you could say it was somewhat likely that the Lakers pick would fall in that 2, 3, 4, 5 range. And given the guys that we know about in the 2018 draft, that would land a very, very good player. But now, if the Lakers are able to go make a move and pick up Paul George, that changes everything, and the deal hasn't even been completed yet. So if the Celtics were picking up that Lakers pick, hoping to then later maybe move it, maybe use it in a trade for Jimmy Butler, then it's only been, whatever it's been here, 20 hours or something like that since that trade broke. And it already seems like that Lakers pick could be on the verge of losing some serious value, which then means that the Celtics really only get the 2019 Kings pick, which, I mean, it's tough to project out 2 years like that. So,
yeah, it's really tough. So, yeah, there's no question. I'm sure they're not liking this news. It can only hurt their pick's value, and that's pretty frustrating, I'm sure, for them. I will say in defense of Boston, maybe they saw something from Markelle Fultz and weren't as impressed as people like myself from the outside looking in are, saying, and that's a possibility. They worked him out. They got a chance to really know him. They spent quite some time with him. So maybe they were, they came away from that saying, okay, the difference between a guy like Fultz and a guy like Jason Tatum or Josh Jackson isn't that significant. So we should pull the trigger on this deal and get another draft pick. Maybe that's the case. We don't know. But it's really hard to say. And I think the reason you draft a guy like Markelle Fultz isn't because of what he is today. It's what he can be 5 years from now. So it's hard to say what they were kind of thinking. But, yeah, I mean, there's no question that this Paul George news could hurt them and hurt the value of that pick. Ideally, I think they went into this thinking, okay, we'll have Philadelphia's first this year, the number 3 pick, and then next year we'll have Brooklyn's first round pick again. So they could potentially, if Brooklyn's really bad again, they could have the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft. And then if LA is bad, they don't get Paul George, they could have, the second pick or, number 2 through 5, whatever LA's pick ends up being. They would have their own draft pick. And then you look at 2019, not only, if they don't get the Lakers pick, then they get Sacramento's pick. But then that year, they also have their own pick, the Clippers pick, and the Grizzlies pick. So you're talking about, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
It's all
7 draft picks coming in. Yeah, first round draft picks that they'll have over the next 3 years, if you include this year. And a few of those could be number 1, top 5 picks. So that's where I think Boston. I understand where they're coming from, and maybe what Boston's doing is maybe they weren't as sold on Fultz, and then we talked about this on a podcast a while back. Maybe they're looking at Golden State right now and saying, okay, we're not competing for the next 5 years. This team's not going anywhere. They're going to re-sign Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. They're only going to get better as they gain chemistry, and more guys are going to want to go sign there and chase a ring. So maybe this is them punting on the next few years and saying, okay, we'll see what we can do with our core of Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley, Al Horford. We'll see what that core can do. Maybe they go and sign a free agent like a Blake Griffin or Gordon Hayward. So you keep the window, the championship window open a little bit, but maybe they are preparing for, the next decade. Maybe they're saying it's better to have these 7 first-round picks, Jaylen Brown, some of these young guys that they already have, and looking ahead to that. Maybe that was their incentive here, but like you said, to answer your question, certainly this Paul George news doesn't help them. It does hurt their value of that pick.
See, what you just said there, I think that could be a problem for the NBA. Right, if you've got your conference finalist, the team that finished in first place in the Eastern Conference, if that's really Boston's thinking, is if it's, Golden State is too good and we don't have a shot, that's why we need to load up on draft picks now rather than try to add pieces to win right now, I think that's a concern. If you've got one team that's that good to where even your Eastern Conference first place team and Eastern Conference finalist decides that it's not worth it to try to win right now because it can't happen. I don't know if that's such a good thing for the NBA, right?
That's horrible for the NBA because ideally you want parity, which isn't going to happen in the NBA with these super teams forming with 7-game series. You're never going to get parity like the NFL has, for example.
Right.
But you want at least 4, 5, 6 contenders, legitimate contenders. So if Boston is looking forward to the future and saying, okay, we already have some flexibility because we've had these top draft picks in recent years. We have Brooklyn's pick. We have a couple more draft picks coming in. Let's focus on the future. You cross Boston off the list potentially as one team that really has a shot to bring down Golden State. And then you're left with Cleveland, who I think we just saw needs to make improvements and some kind of moves in order to be able to compete legitimately with Golden State, or Golden State needs to have injuries or decline or something. And then you're left with maybe San Antonio, and outside of that, Houston maybe. Daryl Morey's already kind of said that he's going to make moves and really go all in on winning now. So, Houston's not backing down. But that's a very limited number of teams that have a chance to compete with the Warriors. And I think you look at a lot of teams around the NBA, the up-and-coming teams are still a few years away. The teams like Milwaukee, people have pointed to Minnesota, now Philadelphia with this young core. Obviously, the Lakers, if they're able to get Paul George and then put some pieces around him and this young core, then they're interesting. But those teams are a few years away. What it leads to is the Warriors not only becoming a dynasty, but not really having much competition in the process, and that's bad for the NBA. I think right now everyone kind of points to the NBA Finals ratings and say, "Oh, look, fans are still paying attention, so it doesn't matter." But you have to keep in mind, this was the first year we saw the Warriors in the finals. There's still some newness to this. People wanted to see what the super team would look like and how they'd play against Cleveland. Next year, if this Warriors team goes undefeated through the postseason again and they're back in the finals, there's a little bit less interest. And if there's not as much competition, then there's even less interest. And then the third year, it's even more boring. And suddenly it's like, okay, this has gotten to the point now where we get it. We know what this team is. And meanwhile, you're going to have the Warriors keep getting better and better because they're gaining chemistry and figuring out how to play together and, adding weapons in the offseason that fill some holes that they find, limited holes. But it's going to be a problem as the years go on. I think also it's going to be really hard for the NBA to take the casual fan that's watching because they're interested in Cleveland, Golden State this year in the finals, and making them interested in their local fan base. How many fans in Orlando, let's say, watched the finals because they were curious about LeBron James versus Kevin Durant and said, "Wow, this Warriors team's pretty fun." If you're a fan, how do you turn around the next year and go all in on your support for a team like the Magic or one of these up-and-coming teams, one of these young teams, when you have zero chance of celebrating an NBA championship for the next 5 years, let's say? It's just really hard to get excited and have that fan support for the finals or those TV viewership numbers translate into what the NBA wants.
Well, that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, there is going to be some sort of fan fatigue, right? As the Warriors are continuing to roll, if they do the same thing next year and the year after that. And I guess we should probably mention here that we're just speculating as far as Boston, kind of kicking the can down the road or punting the next few seasons. We don't know that they're doing that for sure.
It just feels that way. And I'll say this too. I want to add this too. Boston fans are upset. You've seen. I have a number of friends that are Celtics fans. They're upset about it. I think they don't want to keep waiting. They were already impatient this past trade deadline where Danny Ainge wouldn't make a trade for a Jimmy Butler or a Paul George. And then, he also didn't make a trade for a rim protector, which I think a lot of people felt like they needed. Boston fans, I think, are even more frustrated by this. You look at the draft picks, and it's exciting because they can have a lot of picks coming in the future. But I do know there are a lot of Boston fans out there that look at this core they have now, look at the cap space they have, and then look at the chance to go out and make some trades, and they're frustrated that the team's not focused on winning right now, if that is indeed the case.
Sure, yeah. I mean, they were frustrated at last year's draft when the Celtics didn't move the number 3 pick for a win now piece. So who knows? Maybe Danny Ainge is able to flip some of these picks for somebody. Maybe Jimmy Butler or whoever ends up coming over to the Boston Celtics. But I suppose at this point we should probably move on to the draft itself. In basketball, it's all about having the right personnel. You can have talented players, but if they aren't the right fit, then it's just not going to work. Well, in the business world, it's the same way. You have to find talent and you have to find the right talent. And that's why ZipRecruiter is so great. You can't find all the best candidates by posting your job on just one site. You just can't. So instead, you need to post on all the top job sites, and now you can do that with ZipRecruiter. At ZipRecruiter.com, you can post your job to 100 plus job sites with one click. Then their powerful technology officially matches the right people to your position. You don't just get talent, you get the right talent, you get the right fit. That's why ZipRecruiter is so different. Unlike other sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you, it finds them. In fact, over 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just 24 hours. No juggling emails or calls to your office, just screen, rate, and manage candidates all in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes across the country. Now my listeners can start forming their own winning team on ZipRecruiter for free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/Lakers. That's right, ZipRecruiter.com/Lakers, and you try it for free. Again, easy to remember, ZipRecruiter.com/Lakers. So the draft is coming up on Thursday, and it's one of my favorite days of the year. I love the NBA draft, all the intrigue around it, all the potential for trades. Sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there's not. But it's just always such a fun night, and the build up to it, especially this year, has just been so phenomenal. So at this point, we do have some certainty. I mean, we know Philadelphia is going to take Markelle Fultz with the first pick, which means the Lakers are kind of on the clock right now with that second overall pick. And as much as the rumor has been since the draft lottery that the Lakers will take Lonzo Ball, I mean, everybody thought that was a done deal. Since then, we've heard almost nothing but negative things about Ball as far as rumors are concerned, and more about the Lakers considering other players like Josh Jackson, De'Aaron Fox. We've heard about them maybe trading back. We heard about them trading up to maybe try to get Fultz, but they couldn't get that done. What do you think the Lakers do with this pick?
I do think they'll take Lonzo Ball. If you feel like you have Paul George coming at some point here in the near future, then going after Josh Jackson or Jason Tatum doesn't make much sense. So really it's down to Ball or De'Aaron Fox, in my opinion. I did a video recently. I texted a bunch of different executives and scouts and players and asked for their opinion on what they would do. And I was really interested. A lot of the executives and scouts said that they would take De'Aaron Fox over Lonzo Ball. And they said it had nothing to do with Lonzo Ball's dad, LeVar. They felt like it was because, Fox fit better with the Lakers. They felt like Fox was the better prospect. A number of them felt that way. One executive specifically said, we have Lonzo Ball a lot lower on our draft board than mock drafts do. So there are definitely some, people out there that aren't as high on Lonzo Ball and are high on De'Aaron Fox. I think you're going to notice on draft night, there's a lot of teams that are interested in De'Aaron Fox and may even be willing to trade up to get a guy like De'Aaron Fox if he's there, at number 4 or number 5. Teams may be calling Phoenix or Sacramento to try to get De'Aaron Fox because he has a lot of fans around the NBA. With that said, though, I do think Lonzo Ball will be the pick for the Lakers. There's just been, so much talk about it. They've gotten to know him. Reportedly, they aren't really concerned about, LeVar, and they feel like Ball can really fit with them. He's a guy that is going to make his teammates better. I think he's a really good facilitator, a really good pass-first point guard. Averaged almost 8 assists last year at UCLA. Played really well. I think he's a guy that if you look toward the future, you have Ball as your point guard of the future. You're playing D'Angelo Russell probably off ball, and then trying to build around. And obviously Paul George maybe is in the mix there. You have, some nice pieces in your front court with Julius Randle, Larry Nance Jr., Zubac. There's a number of pieces to like there, but I think Ball is probably the best fit for them. So I would go Ball, and I think they will.
I agree with that. I think that at the end of the day, it's going to have to be Ball. And I think most of this is pure speculation on my part, but I think most of the anti-Ball stuff that we've been hearing, while some of it is legit, at the same time, it behooves the Lakers to make sure that nobody else knows who they're going to take. So they don't really want, as soon as the lottery results were read, everybody went, oh, Lonzo Ball is going to the Lakers. That's it. That's not what the Lakers want. They want teams to be guessing who they're going to take because that fuels trades and might convince teams to call them up with an offer. Now, as much as I want to continue talking about the draft, we just had another Woj bomb here. I guess we can talk about this real quick. Adrian Wojnarowski of The Vertical just tweeted out, I don't know if you saw this, Alex, but it says, Indiana's Kevin Pritchard engaging teams on trading Paul George, but so far not the Lakers. There's a rental market, but how robust, with a question mark. So it sounds like Indiana is doing kind of like what we were talking about, that they are going to be looking for another team that'll be interested in perhaps renting Paul George for a year. Is this surprising at all to you?
This makes sense. Just like we said, they want to create a bidding war. And if there is a rental market, then you're going to contact every single one of those teams and see what they're willing to offer, because all they can do is force the Lakers to, improve their offer, or the Lakers could sit back and say, okay, go ahead and trade him. We still feel confident he's going to come as a free agent. But, it's going to be, this is where, maybe a team like Boston or one of the teams that you mentioned, Clippers, they could be really interesting because obviously they're also in Los Angeles. Maybe they feel like getting him in the mix there could allow them to keep him long term, and he would settle to stay in Los Angeles with the Clippers rather than go to the Lakers. But no, I mean, this is what Indiana has to do. This was the obvious next step for them when Paul George said he was going to leave. Just because he says, I prefer the Lakers, you still want to contact every team. And I'm pretty sure, we talked about where leaks come from and where these reports come from. This has to be Indiana putting it out there, letting it be known, okay, we're talking to other teams. We're not going to talk to the Lakers right now. We understand the Lakers would make a trade for him, that Paul George wants to go to the Lakers, but we're talking to everyone else. Call me right now. Give me your best offer.
Right. Okay, so that's what's happeing here, and yeah.
Anything else, Woj? Jeez, I mean,
yeah, I know.
The last 24 hours have been crazy. I mean, we can't even finish a podcast. We can't even finish a podcast without getting through more Woj bombs, man.
Maybe we'll have another one before we're done. So Boston at 3 now. This, I mean, it's going to be interesting because everybody said, oh, Boston's locked in on Josh Jackson. They love Josh Jackson. And then there's a counter report saying, no, wait, they also like Jason Tatum because, again, nobody wants to be locked in on any one player because otherwise then the Lakers could hold Josh Jackson hostage, theoretically, right? If they know Boston definitely wants Josh Jackson, the Lakers go to the Celtics and they say, hey, what are you going to give us to not take Josh Jackson or to swap the second pick with you? So end of the day, push comes to shove, what the heck do the Celtics do with this third overall pick? Or do you think that they even pick anyone with it? Could they move it?
Well, I think, if you're Danny Ainge right now, you are looking at your trade options. You have to be talking to teams like Chicago about Jimmy Butler. You have to be talking about, any star that's available. But I think they end up using the draft pick. That's kind of what Danny Ainge has been doing in recent years. And like you said, you don't want other teams to know what you're doing and what you're thinking. That's why anytime there's a report this time of year, like, oh, the Lakers weren't impressed with Lonzo Ball and he was a little bit overweight or didn't look great during his workout, or you hear the Celtics are considering either Tatum or Jackson. They're not locked in on one person. I don't believe that stuff. There's so much smoke screen this time of year and so many reports that just aren't accurate. Or are accurate. Reporters are reporting exactly what they're being told, but executives aren't being honest this time of year. It's really hard to get honesty from executives this time of year because it just doesn't help them to be honest. There's no real reason. They have every incentive to go out and lie and try to throw teams off and help their trade leverage. So I do think Boston keeps the pick. It's interesting because Josh Jackson seems like the Danny Ainge pick here. Knowing Danny Ainge, he likes athletes, likes two-way players, likes guys with a lot of potential. I just think Jackson's probably the guy, and I think it's no coincidence that whenever this trade was being discussed, that Jackson to the Celtics was discussed so much. I think it was because people around the NBA knew that Boston likes Jackson. And even before that trade happened, I want to say the day before, there was another GM that said, I could see Jackson going number 1 to Boston. So there was talk that they would even reach for Josh Jackson at number 1 if they couldn't make a trade. So I think Jackson's probably the guy. Jason Tatum is a very good player. Don't get me wrong. He was very good at Duke. I think he's a really good scorer. He can create his own shot. He's younger than Tatum, or he's more than a year younger than Jackson. So that's interesting too. So I think Tatum is being considered somewhat, but I still think Jackson's the guy. I'd be surprised if they went in another direction. That's not based on sources. That's me just kind of looking at Danny Ainge and the players that he likes. I think they probably go Josh Jackson.
And as of right now, this could change, but as of right now, I believe that neither Lonzo Ball nor Josh Jackson have agreed to go work out for the Boston Celtics. In fact, I had LeVar Ball on this show, on our last show just a few days ago, and I asked him, has that changed at all? And of course, this was before the trade, before Boston went to 3. But he confirmed again, he said, no, we have no desire to go work out for the Boston Celtics. So do you think that's going to have any kind of impact whatsoever, or do the Celtics still just pick a player even if they haven't worked out for them?
That's a great question. I know there are definitely some executives around the NBA that don't want to draft a player you haven't seen. You want to get them in your facility because not only is the workout aspect important, you want to get to know them as a person. You want to be able to, do your medical homework on them, have them, do a physical, get their medical file and see all that, because there's so much pressure to get these kind of picks right. When you have a top 3 pick, if you miss on that draft pick, obviously it can really hurt your organization. But there's even more incentive to get the pick right these days now with, rookie contracts. If you can get a star player on a rookie contract, that helps your franchise so much. And it's probably, it's the best value in the NBA because, rookie contracts are so much lower than free agent contracts and things like that. So you have to get the pick right. And I think that's where some executives don't want to pick a guy sight unseen. You want the guy to come in your building. The question now is, will Josh Jackson go work out for the Celtics now that they're at number 3, and it seems like there's a real shot that they could pick him? He hadn't done it before. Like you said, he hadn't worked out for him. I think that was maybe his camp thinking, okay, they're going to draft Markelle Fultz. Now, I think if he doesn't work out for him, maybe that says something, and maybe that would make them lean toward a Jason Tatum, who has worked out for them, I believe. I think Jason Tatum has went and seen Boston, has worked out for them. So maybe that's what it comes down to. But I think, if you're Josh Jackson, my question is why. I understand Lonzo Ball not wanting to work out for the Celtics because he wants to be in LA. He thinks the Lakers are a great situation. But, what does Josh Jackson gain from this? I don't really understand it. Even when they had the number 1 pick, I don't understand why you don't go work out for them and try to wow them. Maybe you assume Markelle Fultz is the guy, but if you do really well in a workout or you really impress them in your interview and your medical file comes back great, you could be the number 1 pick and you can make more money. I just don't understand where Josh Jackson's camp, why Josh Jackson's camp is doing this, because it could lead to him dropping to number 4, number 5 to Phoenix or Sacramento. And that doesn't seem like it's the best scenario. I mean, maybe there's some concern that if you go to Boston, you could be just kind of dangled as a trade chip for the next few years. I mean, that's the only thing I can really think of. But I'm curious to see now if Josh Jackson and his camp change their mind and let him go work out for Boston.
Yeah, it definitely will be interesting. I guess I don't know that this is really justification, as far as Josh Jackson not working out with Boston, but I can understand the mindset a little bit. Because if you look at Boston, right, if he goes there, then assuming he's either a 2 or a 3, I mean, you're talking about playing behind Avery Bradley, then you've got Jay Crowder, Jaylen Brown. I mean, those are 3 pretty significant players that you're trying to get minutes from. And so that could be an issue, whereas, hey, if you drop to 4 at Phoenix, then you've got to beat out TJ Warren. Right?
Yeah, you're the guy, probably, from day one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's got to be part of their thought process. But who knows? I mean, now that the Celtics are at 3 and it's more likely to take Josh Jackson, maybe he goes and works out for them. We won't know. Probably by the time this podcast publishes, we'll know, because we're going to publish it tomorrow. Hopefully Paul George isn't traded between now and then, because that would kind of suck.
Yeah, please, Woj, just give us a day. Please just let us talk about something else for a day. Just don't come up with a Woj bomb about Paul George being traded. Just give us one day, buddy.
Yes, that would be great to not have an entire podcast down the drain. So now you're in Orlando. You're in Florida. The Orlando Magic are an interesting spot. Who are they really hoping will fall to them? Because it feels like they're kind of sitting just outside the typical Big 5 that we're hearing of with Tatum, Fox, Fultz, Ball, and Jackson.
Yeah, if one of those guys fall, they'll take them, I think. But if those guys don't fall, then they have a tough decision to make. Jonathan Isaac has been linked to them quite a bit. He actually is really, a local kid. He grew up in Naples, Florida, went to IMG Academy, then went to Florida State. So he's been in Florida for basically his entire life. He is really interesting because John Hammond is now the new GM of the Magic, and he drafted Giannis Antetokounmpo, drafted Thon Maker, drafted, all these guys that are known for their length, and that's why I think you're hearing a lot about Jonathan Isaac. He's 6'11", has a 7'2" wingspan, great defender. He has a lot of potential. So Isaac's been the guy that everyone has kind of linked to Orlando at number 6, but my question for them is, I'm curious if they view him as a small forward. Do you want to have him be a, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kevin Durant type small forward? Because if that's the case, I get it. If not, though, then I don't see why you pick him if he's a power forward, because they have Aaron Gordon and they're really committed to him long term at the power forward position. So if you don't think Isaac can play small forward, then that's where you start looking at some other options. Dennis Smith, Malik Monk, guys like that who could help the backcourt. Elfrid Payton, I actually just had him on the podcast yesterday. We recorded the episode. He's going to be one of our first guests next week. The episode's going to come out. We have a number of, like, you know, star players that are coming on as our first few guests, and then Elfrid's going to come on shortly after that. But we had him on the podcast, and he's talked to John Hammond, and, you know, they've made it clear to him that you know, they are interested in keeping him. So that makes me wonder if they, you know, are going to look elsewhere. They're not going to look at point guard. If they feel like Elfrid can be their point guard of the future, and look, he's a guy that in the last month of the season, you know, was a triple-double threat every night, averaged 16, 9, and 7. He played really well toward the end of the season and after the All-Star break. You know, if they feel like Elfrid can be their guy going forward, then maybe they do look at Jonathan Isaac. Maybe they look at, you know, getting a shooting guard like Malik Monk alongside Elfrid, because Mario Hezonja hasn't worked out. It remains to be seen, but I think Isaac's the guy right now that everyone's kind of penciling into Orlando because of John Hammond's history and the kind of prospects that he likes.
I don't know how comfortable I would be with committing long term to Elfrid Payton. I don't know that he's shown enough to really be the guy for them. I mean, what's the feeling like there in Florida?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're concerned about the shot, obviously, but I think also he's 23 years old, so he's still very young. Even though he's had 3 years of experience, he's 23. There's a lot of people who feel like, you know, he can improve that shot. He shot 40% from 3 in the last month of the season. So I think you have to wonder, okay, which Elfrid's going to show up. And that's one thing I asked him on the podcast. I was, you know, pretty straightforward with him that there's people that, you know, are in his camp or are, you know, on his side that said, look, he can be a triple-double threat. He shot 40% in the last month of the season. He's a good defender. Let's, you know, give him some more time. And then also, you know, he worked pretty well with Frank Vogel in the second half of the year. They're both defensive-minded guys. But then there's other people that say, okay, he can't shoot the ball very well, and you know, he's not a star-level point guard, and that's what you need in today's NBA. So there are definitely two camps that feel very different about Payton, and the question is, you know, which player will he be long-term? I would give him a little bit more time, I think, because he is still pretty young, and because he finished the year so strong. I want to see what he can do with, you know, another season under Frank Vogel. That's one thing, too, that, you know, we kind of talked about. He's had 3 different head coaches now in 3 years. If you talk about Jacques Vaughn, you know, interim coach they had, and then Frank Vogel, he's had a ton of different teammates because they've made so many different moves. They've traded, you know, a ton of different guys in and out. So he's had to, as a point guard, that's pretty tough, getting acclimated and adjusted to different coaches, different systems, different teammates. So he's excited about having some continuity entering this year, having the same coach, having the same teammates. So I definitely understand where people come from when they say that Elfrid, you know, may not be the guy for Orlando going forward, but there's a lot of things to consider there too.
Yeah, it is going to be an interesting situation to see, you know, kind of how that all plays out. They've got their Magic just always seem like they are 1 or 2 pieces short of really getting something going, and they just can't seem to really get things clicking. I know there was hope that they would that things would be a little bit better last season with Serge Ibaka, and then that didn't work out. So this will be a big draft pick for the Orlando Magic, and we're going to see where they go. Now, the further we project out in the draft, the harder it gets to really, you know, make any projections with any kind of certainty, because one thing changes and then another thing changes, and you get kind of the snowball effect, where next thing you know, you've got somebody sliding. So it's, by the time we look at the Lakers' next pick, which is 28th, I mean, it's almost impossible to really know who's going to be there and who's not and everything. So let me just ask you this. Do you foresee this being a busy draft night in terms of trades?
Yeah, I do. I think there's been a lot of talk about teams, you know, wanting to move up, and I think anytime you have a situation where you have a number of teams that have multiple picks, you know, like I think of, you know, Portland having 3 picks here and, you know, average just outside the lottery. You know, anytime you have situations like that, then those teams are obviously calling and you know, trying to shop their picks, but then you also have teams that are calling them, trying to make moves. So I think we could see an active draft night. I think also this draft class is very interesting. There's a lot of guys that are really young, a lot of one-and-done guys. Usually you see, you know, one-and-done guys near the top of the board, and then maybe, you know, a few outside the lottery. But, you know, in this draft class, you can find guys that are one-and-done that have a ton of potential as late as the early second round. You know, you talked about that Lakers pick. There's been, you know, you have guys like Terrence Ferguson, Ivan Rabb. I'm looking at just some of these mock drafts. Frank Jackson, Tony Bradley. All these guys that are projected to go around that area are one-and-done players. And while it's tough to project those guys because there's not as much game film and you don't know how good they're going to be, they're also the kind of picks that teams look at as potential home runs, because you can maybe find a guy that could be a star player later than usual. That's how you end up with Rudy Gobert. So you look at the fact that there's so many international guys and one and done guys. You could try to find a star player at the end of the first round or early in the second round. And I think when you have that kind of situation too, you see a lot of movement, a lot of trades from teams, because they've fallen in love with the guy and think he could be much better than the draft pick where he's going to be picked, and then they look to make a move.
Sure, yeah. I mean, when you look at one of the Lakers' best draft picks recently, it wasn't even really a draft pick, but Jordan Clarkson, who they got at 46.
Yep.
Jesse Buss, who was the Lakers' director of scouting, and of course one of Dr. Buss's kids, recently did an interview with Lakers.com, and he said, that when we did our big board and we did our tiers and all that kind of stuff, that Jordan Clarkson was a clear first round pick and was a lot lower on our board, and we saw him slipping, and so then we went and made a move. So they had a player that they really liked, and it worked out. So as the draft progresses, you could see teams who really like a certain player. That player starts to slide a little bit. They may start throwing out offers and trying to get something done. So that's why draft night is always so interesting and so much fun. It's, as I said before, one of my favorite days of the year. So yeah, great point there, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it happens every year, and this year it just stands out to me. There's so many freshmen and so many sophomores too, guys that are underclassmen. And the thing is, you have to keep in mind the teams that are picking usually, at the end of the first round, if you look at picks 29 through 31, let's say, teams like San Antonio, they're not always looking for the young guy. They're looking for the guy that can come in right away and be a contributor right away. So the team's boards are very different. A team like Toronto or Utah or San Antonio isn't looking for the same kind of talent that another team is. They're not looking for the guy that could be a home run 5 years from now. They're looking for the guy that could come in and help their defense, or the guy that can come in and be a shooting specialist. So that's where you can have some of these trades really work out for both teams, because they have very different goals on draft night. But yeah, I'm very excited too. I think the draft is so much fun. I leave for New York on Wednesday. I'll be shooting a bunch of video with prospects that are going to be there in the green room. Those will be going out on Wednesday, and then obviously Thursday, we'll be writing a bunch of articles and doing a bunch of content from New York. So I'm excited. And actually, I'll plug this too. The day after the draft, the Big Three, the 3-on-3 league, the Ice Cube started, is doing a media day in New York on Friday. So I'll be interviewing a bunch of guys from there. Some of the coaches there, Dr. J, George Gervin, Gary Payton, Rick Barry. I'll be interviewing them as well as some of the players from the league, like Allen Iverson, Chauncey Billups, Steven Jackson, Kenyon Martin, the big name players. So there's going to be a lot of content over the next week that I'll be putting out on Twitter and on hoopsite.com.
Alex, I was excited for draft day already, but now I gotta admit I'm just a little bit jealous of your draft day.
I'm excited too. I always love being there at the draft. It's cool talking to the different players and kind of getting to know them, and then it's cool just to see these guys live out their dream. They've worked so hard, and especially like these guys the guys like Markelle Fultz and Josh Jackson and Lonzo Ball. From the time they were in middle school, they've been working toward this and making sacrifices. Not going to parties, not being a normal kid. So to see it all culminate in this moment where they're finally living their dream and seeing it come true, it's just so cool to be a part of that and be able to interview them and watch them kind of live out one of the best days of their life.
Alex, I hate to say this, but I thought we would get through the rest of this show without another Woj bomb.
Oh boy, what do we got?
Well, now Woj just reported that one of the teams that has been discussing a Paul George trade with the Indiana Pacers is the Cleveland Cavaliers.
There you go. I mean, it's not a surprise. You mentioned Cleveland earlier. They want to make moves right now to keep up with Golden State. It's funny. I talked to a number of people within the Cavaliers organization at the trade deadline, and they were talking to me about They basically said they didn't care what Toronto did. They didn't care what Washington did. They didn't care what Houston did. They're looking at the Warriors and really focusing all of their moves and all of their attention on the Warriors and how they can compete with Golden State. They believe that they're the best team in the Eastern Conference pretty easily, that they don't have to worry about Boston and other teams like that. So they want to make sure they have a roster that can compete with Golden State. So you're going to keep seeing moves like this and rumors like this that link the Cavaliers to players, either guys that are stars like Paul George that they could get as a rental, and then the idea would be once he's in there with LeBron James and Kyrie Irving and competing for championships, that he says, okay, I love Los Angeles, yeah, it's my hometown, but it's really hard to pass on the situation and go somewhere else. That's what they're hoping. And then you're going to keep seeing Cleveland linked to other minor deals too, where they can go, this year they went out and got Kyle Korver and Darren Williams and Andrew Bogut before he got hurt. They're going to keep pursuing those ring-chasing veteran types in free agency, in trades, in buyouts. That's what Cleveland's going to keep doing. You're not going to hear the Cavs go away because they know they have to make improvements to compete with this Warriors squad.
And again, talking about sources, this latest thing mentioning Cleveland, that's probably not Cleveland saying that they are interested in Paul George. That wouldn't make much sense. Again, this is probably the Pacers putting this out there so that teams know that there are legit alternatives to sending him to the Lakers and then trying to get more for him, right?
Right. I agree with that. I think, if you're Cleveland, you're not going to go out there and say, hey, we're talking to the Pacers, because then all of a sudden, the guys that could be linked to a deal like that, guys like Kevin Love, it just leads to more drama within your own organization. Puts your business out there. But Indiana has every reason to want to make it clear, hey, there's a rental market. We're talking to Cleveland. We're talking to, these other teams. So, yeah, I think this probably is coming from the Pacers to drum up interest, to make it clear there's a rental market. And then to try to, if they do trade him to the Lakers eventually, try to get more out of Los Angeles, because they show that there is a market for George to go to other teams, even without a long-term commitment from him.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right on the money, and that's what we're going to see unfold. Whether this goes down tomorrow, tonight, hopefully not. Hopefully it holds off, or this happens at the draft, or maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe Paul George stays with Indiana. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think we'd better get out of here before anything else happens.
I agree. That sounds good to me.
So, Alex, we've gone on for a bit here, but you've mentioned the podcast a few times. It's debuting, I believe you said this week, right?
Yeah, it'll be out within the next few days of this podcast dropping. I think our first episode should be up Monday night if all goes as planned. We have a all-star player coming on as a guest, and we're going to have him be the first episode, and then we're going to have about 5 or 6 episodes come out shortly after that. So, if you're listening to this Monday, then, it may be up right now. If you're listening to this Tuesday, there's definitely podcasts right now that you can go find. If you just go type in Hoops Hype onto iTunes and search it, or you go on SoundCloud, you can definitely find the different episodes. Or you can follow me on Twitter at AlexKennedyNBA. I'll be tweeting out all of the different links to the podcasts. But yeah, the first week we're going to try to get about 10 episodes out there so that people can really get a feel for the podcast. Find a guest that they want to hear from and listen to it. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of episodes coming out within the next week.
All right. Well, Alex, as always, been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Enjoy draft week.
Thank you. You too. Have fun in New York. I know you're going to give us some great content.
Thanks a lot, man. Take care.
You too. So that was Alex Kennedy of hoopshype.com. Obviously, he's got a new podcast coming out. Definitely would encourage everybody to go check that out. It's going to be awesome. That's going to wrap things up for us today. I will be back later this week. I'm planning on doing a post-draft show that'll be published Friday morning right after the draft. I'll have Corey Hansford from Lakers Nation on for that. And of course, if anything crazy goes on with Paul George between now and then, we may end up having to throw in an emergency pod. But that's about it for now. As always, go check out harrys.com/Lakers and ziprecruiter.com/Lakers. Those are two companies that help support our show, and we sure would appreciate if you would support them. That's it. This has been Trevor Lane, and this is the Lakers Nation podcast.